Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nancy and Ann from Ekaru. We're excited to have you joining us this afternoon. Ann has a lot to share with us today about Microsoft Teams.
All right, great. So thanks everybody for joining us. We will be recording this so you can go back and check later. And so we're going to talk about Microsoft Teams for local businesses. And this is part of our Technology for Main Street series. All right, and this is me. I think everybody knows me on the call. I'm a lifelong technology enthusiast, so I love thinking about this stuff, reading about it every day. I do hold a couple of patents in microprocessor fabrication from my previous incarnation, and I serve on a couple of national boards, the CompTIA ISAO, which is the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Organization. I'm the author of Cybersecurity for Main Street, CyberFit in 21 Days, and also a member of the Threat Locker and ConnectWise advisory boards. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so if we're not already connected, please connect there. All right, so what we're going to talk about is, and I have conversations about this all the time, talking about the cloud. It seems like it's a big mystery to people. So basically what this means is that instead of having computing resources at your local place, and let's see if I can get the slide to move. So kind of the old, what we call the brick and mortar model of technology is everybody had their own server and computers all in one building. And the world has changed a lot because of technology advances. And a lot of that was accelerated by the pandemic, where people out of rulings from the government were not allowed to come to work, and we had to figure out quickly how to work remotely. And thankfully a lot of things were already in place, like distributed phone systems. So like the go-to phone system we have, the phone can ring anywhere on your smartphone, etc. But the trend now is everything's moving to the cloud. And if it's a mystery to you, more than likely your email has been in the cloud for many, many years. So it's kind of rare these days that people actually run what's known as an Exchange server in-house. So everything's moving to a data center somewhere else. But that's basically what the cloud is. It's instead of having your computing resources local in your building where everybody works, the computing resources are now in another data center. And these data centers have earthquake zone protection, multiple cooling systems, generators. It's a lot more robust than the electricity and internet in your local office. All right, so we're going to talk about Microsoft Teams. And a big mission for us at Ekaru is to help people get more from the technology you already have, and also teach you about technology that you need to know about. And I'm a big believer that technology is not just for the benefit of really big companies. Technology really is to benefit everybody. So with Microsoft Teams, this is something you probably already have as part of your Office 365 suite. So it's probably sitting there ready for you to experiment with it. So the platform includes chat and video conferencing, file sharing, and other productivity tools. And it's basically a digital hub for your team, and it ties in with SharePoint, which is your file sharing system in the cloud. So it basically brings everything under one umbrella. All right, so Microsoft licensing, they make it's actually very complicated, but some of the basics are most of folks in our community would have either Microsoft 365 Business Standard, and the chart shows everything that's included in there. And you see that Teams is already included in there. So you have it. You may not have actually used it, though. Microsoft 365 Business Premium, that's where more and more of the folks we work with are going because of enhanced security features. There's also ways of managing devices remotely with this too, with the Entra ID. So sort of back in the day when you had a server in place, what's known as Active Directory is what authenticates everybody. That's what manages your identity. It says, Anne is allowed to log in and view these files. Karen is allowed to log in and view these other files. So that's what now they call it Entra ID. It used to be Azure Active Directory until very recently. But the point I want to make is each Microsoft license bundles different things. And also, by law, they have to sell every single license individually as well. And now with the EU rules, uh, they have to sell Teams separately. But the bundle you already have, it's not that Teams got taken away, is now folks have the option of buying Microsoft 365 Business Standard without Teams. That's probably more than you wanted to know, but I just wanted to point out that this is really the trend where businesses are going. You probably already have Microsoft Teams, and despite the fact that the Microsoft landscape can be kind of confusing when it comes to licensing, you can kind of distill it down to the main things that businesses, up to 300 people would use. All right, and this just shows a couple of more variations. So there is a business basic product where you don't have access to the programs on your computer like Word and Outlook. You can only view them in the cloud. We don't see that used very often, but sometimes you have folks who just need email and they don't need other things, so they would just get that. And I'm going to get something off my screen here. All right. So the reason for everything moving into the cloud is really to accommodate remote and flexible work. And that's basically what people expect these days. If you have a laptop, you expect to be able to plug in from home. Maybe there's bad weather. Maybe you have a hybrid workforce. Maybe you need to go out in the field and visit one of your clients and you need to bring your equipment with you. And but a lot of people will say with mobile work, collaboration is a big challenge. And the other one here, and this is from research from Pax8 and Microsoft, is that loneliness is also a factor. So that's something about, if you think about Teams, the idea is that you can build up a communication platform within your company. So anyway, something to keep in mind as more and more people work remote. I think every manager knows it makes it harder to manage a team. Technology can help there. 46% of employees admitted to transferring files between work and personal computers when working from home. This is a giant security risk. And if you allow folks to, for example, set up their own Dropbox account, say, hey, I use these files at work, but they're great employees. They're the ones who are working the extra hours, getting stuff done, right? But they're inadvertently creating a giant security loophole for you. So by creating a place where people can collaborate, you will help prevent people from sort of making it up on their own and generating security problems. And 36% of organizations have dealt with a security incident due to a unsecured remote worker. And you'll see this when you read the headlines of major incidents that make national news. You'll see often something tied to a worker working from home because it does weaken the whole security structure, which just means you need to pay attention to it and put in the proper safeguards. 88% of Microsoft Teams survey respondents felt like having all the solutions in one place saves time. So it kind of takes a while to get there. A lot of businesses that we work with, we're talking to folks every day. They'll have a server in place. Maybe they used to run a few critical line of business applications on them, but over time, things have moved to the cloud. So, for example, the medical offices we work with these days, many or most of them are operating their medical record software in the cloud, directly as what's known as SaaS, software as a service. They're not running it on a server that they control. The company they work with, like Epic or eClinicalWorks, Athena Health will be running it in the cloud. A lot of law firm applications work the same way. And people report time savings. This is, from Microsoft. It's tough to say, but I think everybody can relate to, like, okay, wait a second, I put this file here, and now I've got this version of it here. Which one's the latest version? Or perhaps you're emailing files back and forth to somebody to do revisions and you lose track of where you're at. That's like the whole purpose of putting everything in the cloud and under one umbrella. And there's a lot of components to this as well. So it's video meetings and calling. So one thing, if you already have Teams and you're paying for a Zoom business license, you don't need to pay that $15 a month anymore because you already have it in Teams and it's already bundled with your 365. So I encourage folks, and reach out to us, reach out to me anytime if you just want clarification on exactly how your system is licensed. But the screen sharing, being able to collaborate on one document at the same time, that's a really neat thing because sometimes, hey, let's change this sentence. And you could actually both have it open at the same time and be looking at it and talking about it at the same time. And then there's also integration of plugins and things like that and shared calendars. So a lot of features in there. Kind of the most basic is chat. And we use, so actually, we started using Slack a long, long time ago. I'm on a bunch of different organizations where I do that chat communication through Teams, and we sometimes use Teams in house. But the idea is for those little things that you don't need to email back and forth. You might be on a phone call with someone, and hey, I'm on this call. Does anybody know the answer to this? And you could send that out on a chat message to your group, and you'll get some answers back. And you can create groups within there. You can have general. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you could set that up. You can save the messages. So you might have a marketing team, you might have a sales team, an engineering team, you might have a general where, again, to create that community, maybe you're putting out a new joke every day or whatever, but you can have stuff segregated into different channels. Another industry organization I work with has, we have things on cybersecurity, we have things on general business best practices. They're kind of grouped like that. So it's really something to explore and see how it could work in your business. So you got the team sites, the channels, conversations. If you have an announcement, it's a quick way to get out there so it's not buried in somebody's email. So, and then the whole fun and culture building, I think that's really, really important in this day and age of remote work because folks who are remote all the time otherwise wouldn't really feel like they're part of things. Just like the chatter that goes on during the day. Somebody sees an interesting article. It's just like kind of that water cooler conversation. And there's a lot of third-party apps that can integrate. And in fact, our entire cybersecurity training platform now integrates with Teams. We're in the process of folks who are actively using Teams. This way, when you get the micro training, you don't have to go into email and then log into a website. You can do it all within Teams. So it could just be a separate channel on your Teams for working in there. So, lots of really great things in there. So Teams calls, this is from some materials. I just took some screenshots of some items from Pax8 and Microsoft here. But this, if folks are familiar with Zoom, you could do everything that you can do in Zoom with a Zoom business license within Microsoft Teams. So you have the whole raising the hand, giving reactions, etc. You can view people in gallery mode. And then I don't know if you've ever seen this is called together mode. I think it looks kind of odd, but it's just sort of it's fun if you're doing like a Friday afternoon team meeting. This could be a fun way to present it. But I'm a big fan of just set up a meeting, get a couple of friendly people together, set up a meeting, then try all of these settings. So you can do different backgrounds. If you've ever been on a meeting and you realize, oh, you know what, we need to get John on this meeting as well. You can just go in here under the ellipses and pull down the meeting info and just copy the link and then shoot them over that link. So it makes it really easy to do that. You can record the meeting and you can actually get a transcript of the meeting as well, which is kind of neat. So, maybe you're working on creating a manual for something. Sometimes just people talking like, hey, I think this should be this section. You might come out with kind of a rough draft by the time. So playing around with the transcript is pretty cool. So I'm kind of exposing you to a lot of things because I want folks to get interested and curious about what you can do with this because you probably already have this with the typical Microsoft licensing that we do. So all your files can be put in the cloud with security permissions. It can replace Dropbox. Some of our folks are on the legacy Datto workplace. I really love that. Going along, we've been using it maybe for 10 years. Where you can share files externally and internally. With externally, you can do the same things in Microsoft Teams. You could share it with a password, with encryption and all that. And you can replace, if you're paying for the business license of Zoom, you could replace that. So you might have some cost savings, which is always a pleasant surprise. The other thing, too, I would really urge people to talk about is the notion of shadow IT. So if your organization doesn't provide a great way for people to share files and collaborate and get things done, people tend to just do their own thing. So when we run security scans on companies and we report, here's all the SaaS applications folks are working with, often we'll see Dropbox on there and we'll tell people that if you're not using the business class version and somebody sets up their own, you now have a data leakage point. If that employee were to ever leave the company, you have no control. That account would be gone, and you have files. This is especially important if you deal with protected information. Anything first initial, last name with social security number, credit card numbers, driver's license numbers. This has been Massachusetts state law now for 14 years that you have to protect that information. And the thing I'd really emphasize to everybody is to give this time. And when you first look at this, let's say you're used to using email for back and forth and you want to start doing Teams messaging, it's going to take a little bit to get used to it. If you're used to, going on your college reunion happy hours on Zoom and you kind of know where everything is, and then you switch to Teams for your office meetings, that can get a little bit confusing. So I just ask people to just be patient. Just try a few things. Don't be intimidated by it. If you don't really grasp everything, start with something small. So I think the chat and the video calls are a really great place to start. And then give yourself time to get used to it. So with that, I'm going to hop into a bunch of frequently asked questions that we get. I'm going to cover a lot of ground. I really intend this to be a workshop to get your interest piqued in what you may be able to do with Microsoft Teams, to get you motivated to dive in and maybe set up your first meeting with Teams or set up a group chat within your organization. And obviously, we at Ekaru are here to help you. So I'm hoping that you're going to see something interesting that might be valuable for your team in the next few slides. So one of the things about Teams is, okay, now you're moving things into the cloud, right? So a lot of people feel like if I can see my server and it's sitting right there, then that's more secure. And you can lock it down, but actually the whole thing could be stolen and removed from the building. And if folks aren't really diligent about patching, like we still get calls from folks who are interested in service and they're running Microsoft Exchange. Like folks haven't on premise, and that hasn't really been done in years. There are so many security threats against Microsoft Exchange. So it's a little bit of a different philosophy. You're going to trust stuff in the cloud, but you do want to look at your security scores. Are you using multi-factor authentication? So if you put all the documents up in the cloud and if people are using weak passwords and not using multi-factor authentication, then you're going to have a security problem. So it's worth looking at all the different things. And Microsoft has this notion of a security score that you can go through and say, okay, we're doing this, we're not doing this. And the idea is to drive up that security score over time. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, an absolute must. And the other thing to recognize is that there's vulnerabilities in cloud applications just like there's vulnerabilities on your on-premise equipment. You may notice if you have an iPhone that you're probably seeing a lot of, hey, we're going to do a security update tonight. Apple does. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. Apple doesn't really transparently explain everything they're doing like Microsoft does on a Patch Tuesday, but Chrome needs to be updated, Adobe needs to be updated, and you need to be aware of keeping everything updated, being on the latest version in the cloud as well, latest version of the browser, etc. Another thing to look for, and we kind of touched upon this, is this whole notion of shadow IT and unapproved applications. So we'll typically scan organizations. People have different appetites for how much security they want to put in place. Insurance companies are changing the tune on this because if you want to renew your insurance now, they're not as lenient as they once were. So they're going to be asking a lot more detailed questions. But it is important to know, for example, somebody in marketing might upload all of your contacts into this marketing platform that sounds like a really great idea, but now you've just moved data to another place. It's extremely important to keep track of where your data is, especially if you're in a regulated environment. And data backup in the cloud. And this is one that, uh, and I've had some heated questions about this one, but this is true for all cloud applications. You need to look at what's going on in the cloud. And this is the Microsoft agreement. So what Microsoft does is they provide the computing power, the physical resources, the cooling, the redundant power supplies, the security updates. They're providing all the infrastructure for you. But what they clearly say is that your data is your responsibility. So I've had people ask me, oh, well, now we're in the cloud. We don't need to back it up. You absolutely need to back up all data that's in the cloud. And we typically in our review meetings will advise that anybody with Microsoft 365 email that we put on an additional backup for you. Very, very important. But this is basically true for any cloud application. You need to be aware of what it's called a shared responsibility model. Microsoft takes care of a whole bunch of things, or Dropbox or any other cloud application will take care of a bunch of items, but the data is your responsibility. And we've had the panic calls of somebody accidentally deleting a whole bunch of files. There's safeguards you can put in place to prevent that, but backup is what saves you at the end of the day. Data loss prevention is another interesting category. It's a little different from backup. Data loss prevention is relates to, like, if I'm sending an email to somebody and I'm going to email a credit card number or a social security number, which is against the law. In Massachusetts, you cannot send an unencrypted message with that. But this would actually stop me from doing it. So that's what data loss prevention. So as you move up in the Microsoft licensing, you get access to more things: encryption, data loss prevention, et cetera. So that's something to keep in mind. So you may have encryption available for folks to send emails when they need to. But without data loss prevention, you don't have a way of preventing them from accidentally sending something without encryption when they should have encrypted it. You could also just say you encrypt everything. That's another strategy in there. But again, I just want to remind folks of things. These are things insurance companies are looking for now. I go through 5, 6-page, 8-page questionnaires from insurance companies these days. They want to know who your MDR vendor is. So if you're working with us, that's going to be SentinelOne on there. But really keep this in mind as you move along in the cloud, because you want the convenience, you want the collaboration, you want the efficiencies. Do it in a way where you're going to maintain the integrity of your security. So another question we get a lot is, what's OneDrive, what's SharePoint? So you could think about OneDrive as your individual filing space where I can put my files, I can store them in the cloud. And SharePoint is where I share stuff with other users in the group. So if you think about a traditional brick and mortar office building, SharePoint would be more like that server where you have the map drive, where you have the marketing folder, the finance folder, the HR folder, and all that. That would be SharePoint. And OneDrive is more like your own D drive where you store things. Setting up team sites. So I would recommend anybody, if you're already licensed for 365, just test drive this and we can set it up for you, or you can go ahead, we can give you instructions for how to do this, but kind of play around with it to see what it could do for you. Within OneDrive, like, I can look at files, people can share files to me. So if somebody's got a file, they could share it out to me. This is a really great, being able to share files from the cloud is a really great feature when you're working with files that are too big to email. So different email services have different limits on how big a file can be that you can email. If you're dealing with architectural drawings, CAD drawings, stuff like that, in marketing, if you're dealing with videos, you're going to be dealing with some big files that you can't email. This is a great way to do it because you could just share it out from here. You can make it password protected. You can expire the link in a couple of days for security. A lot you could do with that, but some files are just too big to email. And even if your email platform allows that size file, you don't know what the other person's ISP or email provider will allow. So this just takes that out of the equation. There's also a mobile app, so folks are always out with their phones right now. So maybe you have that important document that somebody wants you to review. You can do all of this on mobile as well. So that's the benefit of the cloud, that you can get stuff on your laptop, when you're home, away, get stuff on your smartphone as well. Another question we get, or sometimes this comes up because of a problem, but you can decide which files you want to sync locally. And some folks don't sync anything locally. If you were to sync everything locally, you'd fill up your hard drive. Typical hard drives on laptops would maybe be 256 gigs or 500 gigs. We always recommend solid state drives, but you can keep it on your device, or you can select to free up space. So this, if you're working with a lot of files and you don't want to invest in a 2 terabyte hard drive for your system, this is a great thing to keep in mind. And then sometimes we'll get somebody's system will grind to a halt, nothing works, I can't open programs. It's like, oh, your hard drive is full. And so this is a way to deal with that. There's also icons on there, so you could tell if a device is always local or not. So you could, is this one in the cloud or is this one local? So, for example, you may want to sync a device if you're going to maybe go to your lake house and you don't have great internet connection. Then you want to make sure you have the file locally. So you'd want to sync those files, but again, you don't want to sync everything. But it gives you granularity around that. Different OneDrive icons on there. The whole concept of sync, you can elect to sync or not sync. I'm kind of going through this. And you can also access all these files. So when you're working on your computer, you have everything that's on your D drive local to your laptop. And you also have a drive that looks just like the other drives, and you access it the exact same way, but you're actually accessing the cloud. And if you think about this in the traditional brick and mortar office, if you remember, you had some files locally. A lot of folks will say save everything to the server because the server is going to get backed up. But it's the same concept. And what's nice about doing this all within the Windows environment is it's just all going to look native to you. You can click on that OneDrive drive, or you can click on the local drive, and it behaves the same way. It opens up File Explorer. You can share files and folders with different people, so you can be selective about who has privileges to which folder. You might have some that contain sensitive information. You might have some that contain general information. I will say one little thing: as AI becomes predominant, there's some people talk about security by obscurity. So sometimes it's tough to find things in a filing system. But as Copilot becomes more and more mainstream, you can find anything. Anything you have access to, you can find really, really quickly. And we're just emphasizing to folks this whole your Entra ID, managing privileges and resources is extremely important, and it becomes more and more important. Uploading. So this is in a SharePoint site, so you can upload files into there. Going through a lot of things and kind of keeping an eye on the time. You can share outside an organization. And I have a little note on here that kind of gets into some nuances, but something to keep in mind is you should share to guests on the organization, and just keep track of what's getting shared outside of the organization. For folks that we manage who are really far on the security spectrum, we actually alert. They get an alert every time a file is shared outside of the organization. One thing to keep in mind is you always want to be on the lookout for data exfiltration. There are times when you share files out of your organization because you need to get the job done, to get work done, and you may also need to be looking for cases where stuff is being shared out that should not be shared out. You can put restrictions on that. And then we often get questions about file sizes. So 250 gigs is important. And also the file name path can't be more than 400 characters. And just a little side note on that, because if you're not moving stuff into the cloud now, but you're thinking about going to this whole Microsoft Teams SharePoint environment, start looking at your files, because sometimes people have really, really long file, like it's in this folder, this subfolder, this subfolder, this subfolder, and then it has this giant long file name. If that all the characters added up gets over 400 characters, you can't put it in SharePoint. So just a little note. Also, if you have more than, I think it's either 100,000 or 300,000 files, 100,000 files, there are also limitations around SharePoint. That's a lot of files, but it's not infinite. But if you have a lot of small files, you may not have too much storage to go into the cloud, but you may have too many files. You may have to make some choices. The good news is that you could put stuff in the cloud under long-term archive at a much lower cost, so something to consider. One question that we get a lot is, can you collaborate online with a document? Like, a lot of folks do this with personal documents on Google Drive, where you can collaborate. I won't show this video here because it's not a great video and we're running short on time, but you can do that very same collaboration. And I would say, kind of moving this back to security, if you don't provide a way of doing this, I got a call talked to a medical office once, and I had to explain to the doctors why they cannot do this, but they were actually sharing files on Google Drive and just collaborating because it was like so quick and so easy. Total violation of all the HIPAA regulations they have to comply with, but quick and easy. You can make things that are efficient to use, that are very productive and still secure. But if you're not having this conversation with your team about what do you need to get your job done, who do you collaborate with, what size files do you work with, how do you get together? Like on Teams, you can just do a quick huddle. It's like, hey, you know what? We're going back and forth. Let's just get on a video call and do a screen share. You can just instantaneously do that. That's a giant productivity boost for your team. If you're not providing that or doing training on it, then some people are going to find different ways to do it. And then you may wind up with a very serious security problem. So have this conversation, talk to people about what they're doing. If they need to work on a file at home, I've talked to people who say, oh, I just email stuff to my personal Gmail account. And as a security professional, you can have the best firewall in the world, all the security updates, you can be doing everything right, and then you get an employee who is a great, diligent employee, but just doesn't know, and they're basically sending stuff out of your organization. It's giant security risk. Another question we get, does it retain version history? And it does. So I would say just kind of fool around with this. You can save a file and then see it. The cloud works just like the local systems work. Syncing, again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into this, but just a word of caution, you want to sync to the highest level folder that people have access to. It's extremely important when you start putting more and more of your company's data in the cloud that you're very conscious of security roles. And that's a whole Entra ID, Active Directory. You want to keep track of that so you don't inadvertently expose sensitive HR information to the whole organization and you didn't even know it. So be mindful of syncing. A lot of times we're working side by side with somebody, but again, maybe, a lot of times there's a IT point person on site who's very tech savvy. Just keep this in mind. In terms of the meetings that you can just launch directly from Teams, so I can do a one-on-one meeting with somebody. I can do a meeting where I just say, hey, I want to start up a meeting now with everybody in this team. So everybody in marketing, let's jump on this call right now. Everybody in sales, whatever organization. And you could do like this idea of like a quick video huddle when you need to talk about whatever topic. And think about it in an office, you might go grab, hey, you and you, let's just get together and hammer this out right now. Okay, you can do that virtually as well. So again, an individual, I could send a meeting to an individual person, to a team. I can do the chat, either individual or the teams. You keep track of all these different channels. I can schedule meetings directly from Teams. The recipients can join from Teams or they can join from their calendar. And this is something I would just say, I'm telling you a lot of stuff right now. What I want to address is it can basically do everything that you want to do. And if you get some diehards who saying, well, I always use Zoom or I always use this, you'll be able to learn this pretty quickly, but maybe get some test cases. This one, it just shows up in your feed. You can join from, so this all shows up in Outlook, and that's kind of the benefit of having everything under the Microsoft umbrella, because you have your Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and all that. That's all Microsoft. Your calendar is Microsoft. Your mail is Microsoft. Your Teams. So things do play nice together. Video and audio options. Well, you can change your volume. You can pick your camera. Everything you do in any other video platform. I'm not sure what I was showing here. I was launching off of my Outlook calendar. This is what a meeting would look like. And I can create the meeting right by, like if I'm setting up a meeting, I can have it always created as a Teams meeting by default. I can press a button to, hey, I'm having this meeting, just press a button and say, make it a Teams meeting, and then it will give the login information at the bottom. So I could do it a couple of different ways. I could just start a new Teams meeting, just press that button right away, and it's going to set it up as a Teams meeting. So again, you get that integration between Microsoft Outlook and Microsoft Teams. It's very fluid to work within the system. You can also add people. I talked a little bit about this, but you can copy a meeting link if you realize, hey, you know what, Adam needs to be on this call. So you can quickly send him a message through Teams. Hey, can you please jump on this call? Here's a link. Do it email. You could text it. Do it any way you like, but it's very quick to do that. Okay, and I can send a meeting link via email too. So you could multiple different choices of how you send this. And this is Nancy on the other end. We were just doing a test call to get some screenshots, but when she accepts that meeting, she's going to jump on, have an opportunity to preview her video, and then it says join now. All right. And then one thing, and I've seen this a lot in meetings that I've been invited to. I jumped on a meeting Monday afternoon with a colleague, and so in Microsoft Outlook calendar preferences, you can have it default to make every meeting a Teams meeting. And I don't know if folks have probably encountered this. You get an invitation to a Zoom meeting, for example, and at the bottom it says Teams meeting. So in actually much bigger font. So you can actually turn this on and off. And what I've seen is Microsoft, when they do their updates, sometimes they default this to be back on. But if you ever see it, it's like, no, wait a second, I just set up a Zoom meeting and it's saying Teams at the bottom. You have to take it off of here. And this is where you do it. You go into Outlook, calendar, and then your preferences, and you can set this for you. But I have seen it turn back on again. And we have a blog post, and I've sent that to a lot of different people out there who have sent me a meeting, and it's like, yeah, this always happens. I don't know how to turn it off, and that's how you turn it off. All right, I can create the meeting right within Teams. I'm just kind of quickly going through a bunch of things in the last couple of minutes here. And another question we get a lot is, does this work on a Mac? So everything works seamlessly on a Mac as well. And I made my daughter, so I can join through Teams. So I set up a meeting with my daughter so she could join on her Mac. And so I just go to my calendar and I hit join on this meeting. And then I get in the meeting. I can preview my video. I can mute my video if I don't want to be on camera, but I can also preview it, set myself up in the middle of the camera, adjust my sound, and then click join now. So it gives me that little buffer. All right. And then on the Mac side, calendar looks a little bit different, but same concept. You can join the Teams meeting. All right. And then on my side, I'm saying, oh, somebody's trying to join. Now, do I admit or deny? I'm going to admit, and then my daughter is on the phone with me. So it doesn't matter if you're Mac or PC. This works across every platform. We get that question a lot, so I figured that I would cover it. All right, and then that's me. So it looks exactly the same. I'm on a PC, she's on a Mac. Everything works seamlessly. All right, and in the last, got a couple of minutes on here, And I know folks need to get onto other things at the top of the on the top of the hour here, but we do have a training site, and it's not that widely utilized, but we have a lot of micro trainings around teams. You can actually set up learning paths for your organization, so it's kind of overwhelming. There's a whole bunch of stuff on this training platform. Bit overwhelming, but you can actually set up for your organization. Maybe you say, hey, I want everybody to watch these 3 videos. And it actually tracks who watches them and checks it off. So it's kind of a neat little thing. Setting somebody loose in here to look at everything is too overwhelming. But if you set it up, and we can work with you on this to say, hey, I want my people to watch these 3 or 4 things, we can arrange that for you. But I want to make sure people are aware of that. And as I mentioned before, all of our PII Protect cybersecurity awareness training is all going to be accessible through Teams as well. We have the integration. We're working on that integration right now. But if you're already using Teams, we put you to the top of the list to move that over. And those micro trainings, the insurance companies, it's on every insurance company questionnaire. It's actually really comprehensive training that you can get, the simulated phishing tests. Pretty much everybody we work with is on this platform now, but highly recommend that you engage with it actively, because what we're seeing is insurance companies are now asking for proof. So just like I mentioned in this Teams training platform, you can actually create a learning path and then verify that everybody actually did the training. You get training reports in the PII Protect, and this is a trend. Insurance companies are not going to they're not going to cover a claim if they identify afterwards that you weren't doing what you said you were doing, and they're not going to insure you if you say, if you can't answer in a positive way on these questions. That's a whole other topic, but what I would emphasize is insurance companies are asking for stuff like this for a reason. Oops, and I hope that didn't take my audio. Insurance companies are asking this for a reason, and that's because they see all the claims, they see the forensics, they see, okay, here's our stats on people who don't have MFA. We're not going to insure anybody who doesn't have multi-factor authentication anymore. Here's our stats on people who do log monitoring for devices. I'm getting into different topics. We're not going to insure you anymore if you don't do it. So this is really changing right now. We've seen people denied insurance. All right, so next steps, I'm going to wrap up we got 3 minutes left. But so if you have Office 365, I encourage you to just start using Teams. If you already own it, just start with chat and see what that can do for you. If you want to set up a meeting, if you want to test drive like all the different settings, maybe you're fluent in Zoom, but you need a little refresher. You could set up a Teams meeting with me or anybody on our team and just kind of test drive that. If you have an old server, probably your next upgrade is going to be to the cloud. We're seeing fewer and fewer on-premise servers, unless you have an application that doesn't really have a good way to work in the cloud. Typically now, a lot of folks we see, they just have files on their local server, and it's more efficient to put that in the cloud. And take an inventory of extra licenses. You may have, during COVID, signed up for the business version of Dropbox or Zoom. If you're not using the business version of either, then you got a security problem, so don't use them. But you may be able to save on some licensing costs there. And then we always want to work with folks in our community on developing a roadmap, because you can't do everything in one day, 1 month, 1 quarter. But we want you to have a roadmap of where you could be getting. And as we wrap up here, we are having electronics recycling and hard drive shredding in just a couple of weeks, May 16th. So you can drop off stuff ahead of time. Feel free, this is open to everybody, so feel free to tell your friends. There's nominal fees for the hard drive shredding, $20 a hard drive, and it's kind of cool. They shred them like a paper shredder, and you can drop off stuff ahead of time. We remove the hard drives, lock them up, record the serial number, and then they're matched after shredding. All right, and this is my contact information to reach Ekaru support at any time, support@ekaru.com. When you email that number, it creates a ticket automatically, and you should get a reply back if your email address is in our system. and you can also call for support. And then Nancy is out visiting clients. We all want to hear from you, and we're happy to set up some individualized training as well. So, and it is 1 o'clock now.
And I have one quick question that came in on our chat. How do I know if I already have access to Teams?
Yeah, we can help go through that. So if folks, depending on which license you have, and I had that little screenshot,
In the beginning.
most of the folks, most of the folks are on the business versions of Office 365, probably already have it, but we can cross-check your license type for anybody who has that question.
Great. Okay. Thank you to all our clients and prospects for listening to our informative webinar.
All right, thanks so much for joining us, and please recommend future topics. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.